Afternoon, welcome. Thanks to everybody who's joining us. We've got about a minute and a half before we're going to get started here. So while we are getting everything kind of set up in the background, please feel free to make yourself comfortable, get a snack if you need, and we will get started here shortly. All right, we are going to give everybody about another 2 minutes here to get connected and logged in, because I see we're getting some emails in the Hyatt inbox saying that people are having difficulty joining. So we're going to give ourselves another 2 minutes here. So we will get started at 2:02 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all for your patience, and I'll call out again as we get to the 1 minute or as we're getting ready to start. All right, thank you to everybody who's joining us. I can see we've got the numbers really steadily rising very quickly in the Zoom chat right now. So thank you to everybody who is navigating our technical difficulties and making sure that they are present today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming. Steadily rising very quickly in the Zoom chat right now. So thank you to everybody who is navigating our technical difficulties. All right, I'm going to get us started here today. It looks like we've got plenty of people joining and more people signing on consistently. So I'm going to hit record here and we will get started with today's chat and learn. All right. So first off, welcome. My name is Meg. I'm part of the marketing team here at PowerToFly. And in case you haven't joined us for a chat previously, welcome. And thank you so much for finding your way to us today. And thank you for joining us for today's conversation. If you joined us for last week's more personal version of this subject, as opposed to today, which will be more business focused, the rest of what I'm going to say is going to be very familiar to you. So before I go to introduce our speaker and jump into our very important discussion for today, we have a couple quick housekeeping items to go over. So as you know, most of our chats are focused on participation with our community, and we strive to not mute our community. But because of the sensitive nature of today's topic, as well as the outpouring of very amazing and interesting and thought-provoking questions that we were asked, instead of making this a conversation between our community and our guest, we're going to make it a conversation between our guest and myself. And that way we can hopefully strive to address all of the questions that you all submitted today. But to that end, if you have further questions, if you have follow-up information that you would like, if you need clarification on any terminology or acronyms that we're going to use today, you are more than welcome to participate in the Zoom chat. We have a couple PowerToFly people standing by. They are labeled with PowerToFly after their last names. So they will be helping me moderate and monitor the chat. So please feel free to participate there. Please feel free to submit questions or comments or anything in that area. We always want our community to feel heard. So thank you for joining us today and for participating in that way. As you join, if you find yourself not on mute for whatever reason, please make sure you go ahead and mute yourself. That way we don't have any audio cross-contamination. Everyone is better able to hear everything that Dionna, our guest, is going to share with us today. So thank you. You can also message me privately if you have a question that you would not like to disclose to the group at large. That is totally fine. You can also message Nicole Felter. She's labeled with PowerToFly after her name. You can message her privately as well, and we will save those questions and see if we can either bring them to attention or get some answers for you after today's chat. Last but not least, as always, today's chat is being recorded as well as broadcast to the YouTube live stream. So if you have technical difficulties with the Zoom, you're more than welcome to join us at our YouTube channel. It's at PowerToFly. You are also going to be sent, if registered today, will be sent a recording and a rewatch link once the video is live on our website. So if there's anything else that we send out with that, resources or anything like that, if you are registered, that's where you get that information. So if you miss a question or you come in late or you can't stay for the entire time, that's always an option. You don't have to worry about taking feverish notes or anything like that, because we will send you a link to the recording later on. All right, so let's introduce our speaker. And as we do this, I want to preface it similarly to last week's conversation. This is a very serious topic. It's a very important topic, and we are incredibly grateful to Dionna Smith, our Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion, for taking on not only the emotional lift that is required to tackle a subject like this that is obviously so impactful and so affecting to her family, her community right now, but we want to be very conscious of the fact that this is, it's something that Dionna enjoys talking about, but it is also a very serious and very, very sensitive subject matter. So thank you to all of you for your respect and for your curiosity and for, coming today, hopefully with the intent to learn to be a better ally and be a better, be a better advocate and a better ally and a better person in the world. Like I said last week, it is an absolute privilege to all of us to be able to learn about these things from a person like Dionna, as opposed to having to experience racism every day, either personally or with our close friends or family or in our daily lives. So I want us all to be mindful of that and to try and come to this subject with an open mind and in the full spirit of being a true ally, listening and learning first. So to that end, I will introduce you to our speaker. So for those of you who don't know, Dionna is one of my favorite coworkers. And prior to joining PowerToFly in 2019, Dionna served as the head of global talent strategies and recruitment programs at Delta Airlines. Dionna was named to Atlanta Business Chronicle's 40 Under 40 list and is regularly a featured speaker at conferences. She is most proud of being a mother to 5 outstanding children. So to that end, I would like to welcome Dionna to join us today.
Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for your introduction. And thank all of you. Thank you guys so much for attending and making time to discuss this subject and to focus on this. One of the things that I will say is Meg mentioned, there is so much going on in the world right now. It is a very emotional time. But what's interesting is for me and for many people that look like me, these emotions and many of the things that are going on have been there underlined my entire life, right? So police brutality, racism, white supremacy right now, the media is paying close attention, but this is something that has been ongoing for us. And so what's different right now, though, is that we have the attention of the media, we have the attention of our politicians, we have the attention, most of all, of people who are now seeing things in a way that maybe they didn't see it and are interested in being allies. I'll talk to Meg before, and I was saying my biggest thing with this, a lot of what we're going through, especially my white coworkers and counterparts and in general, is that, you know, some people are feeling like, you know, it's almost like their whiteness is being attacked by the mentioning kind of a Black Lives Matters, and what comes with that is a discussion around racism. And so I want to be clear, we're going to talk today about systematic oppression. We're going to talk about white supremacy, which is what this is really about. It's not anti-white, it's anti-white supremacy. And everyone on this call and everyone who is not a racist or white supremacist has a duty for us to work together to end this. Black people cannot end systematic racism or white supremacy. However, many white Americans and our allies are going to be huge and significant in helping that happen. So though I staying saddened by recent events, I am more so encouraged right now and full of hope by seeing so many people coming together, whether it's through protests or through calls like this, who are just interested in knowing, like, how can I help? How can I be there for Black people as we're going through this? And more than anything, how can we work together to make significant change? So that's kind of the theme of what we'll talk a little bit about today.
Thank you for calling that out, Dionna. And I am putting into this group chat right now a link. So for anybody who was not able to join us last week or didn't know that we had a more personal version of this discussion, less business oriented, let's say, I put a link in the chat so you can go into our website and rewatch there. You can also share it. It's I would highly recommend it if you haven't seen last week's video, that you also watch that. There's some very valuable information in there. And while some of it will be echoed to a certain extent in today's video, there are things that were covered in that video that will not be covered today. So I would greatly encourage, even if you are only coming to this from a business perspective, it would be very useful and very informative to people to watch that video as well.
Thanks, Meg. And kind of as a final housekeeping on my end, so I have a 6-week-old baby, and our last call, I literally had to strap him onto me while I did the chat, and he was quiet as I don't know what and happy the whole time. So he's sleeping right now. So as a disclaimer, if while I'm mid-sentence, someone hands over a baby to me and I wrap it on me, I will continue the conversation, but just wanted to kind of put that out there. So before we get started, we received a ton of really good questions. And so we're going to, again, address those. But I did want to just start by just having kind of a frank conversation about like tactical things that you can be doing as a business leader, as an HR leader, or even someone who is looking to influence these types of things at work. So I didn't want you to leave the call without having kind of a list of a few things that you can actually do. So I wanted to start there today, and then we'll pick up on the questions. So what we're talking about is like, how are you able to address the effects of the systematic oppression that we are seeing at work as well. And so I want to start with talking about race. So obviously, you know, most of us in the workplace have been taught not to discuss race, politics, religion, right? Or just things that we don't necessarily talk about at work. However, we are at a point now where it's essential that we talk about race. Ignoring the elephant in the room is the wrong thing to do right now. In fact, as conversations are happening about Black Lives Matter, about making these changes, et cetera, there's been a lot of light also shown on people that are quiet, who aren't taking a side and who aren't speaking up for what's right. And I think as business leaders and HR leaders in companies, it's important that we do that. We cannot ignore it and not talk about it. So when we talk about race in the workplace and why it's important to do that, over the years, there's also been this theme about being colorblind. And so you would hear a lot of people, leaders even say, you know, I don't understand this, like I'm not racist, I don't see color, I'm colorblind. Well, that's extremely problematic also, because we can't address the things that need to be fixed if we don't see color. So we have to acknowledge that there are differences. We have to acknowledge that there are certain groups of people who are treated differently or haven't had the same opportunities. And so in order to do that, we have to have really frank conversations about race. So my first, just discussion there, and whether it's through your employee research groups, whether it's through small teams at work, is figuring out how to become comfortable talking about race. And I know at PowerToFly, that's been one of we have D&I training, and that's one of kind of our sessions. And one of the things that we're focusing on, allyship obviously is huge, but also just like talking about race, having someone moderate these like conversations about race. So first thing is like figuring out how to get comfortable. Let's not pretend it's not there, and let's start having candid conversations about race. The second thing that I have there is in reference to inclusion events. And so what I mean by this is that, you know, we're at a crossroad here. We're at a point now where we can no longer ignore a number of things, but again, we definitely can't ignore systematic oppression. We can't ignore race and race relations in this country and at work, and we can't ignore kind of white supremacy and how it's affecting all of us, but in particular, Black people. So if you think about it, most of us have certain courses that are required at work, right? And so I know for me, most of the companies that, as I was an HR business partner working there, one of the requirements may be a sexual harassment course or some other kind of employee relations type or compliance type courses that are required of everyone. And then in addition to that, managers and senior leaders may have other courses that are required. If we're setting the cadence that we are that race is important, that racism won't be tolerated, that systematic oppression won't be tolerated, we've got to start having some mandatory inclusive trainings. And for some companies, I mean, it may look different for different companies, but something to really, really think about. Now, whether it's unconscious bias, and I think unconscious bias is a great start, but it is not the end all. And it has unfortunately started to become a box check, oh, everybody took unconscious bias, we're good, and kind of move on to the next thing. That's a great intro because it helps people start thinking internally. But like anything else in our business that we really, really care about, we spend money and we devote time to. So figuring out how to do that. So what I mean by like a monthly basis is having maybe a monthly, it could look like bi-monthly, quarterly, depending on your business, but having workshops, having featured speakers come who are subject matter experts to talk about this stuff. When the media stops talking about this, believe you me, many of your employees are already betting, let's see how long this lasts, right? Let's see how long. So putting something in place that's ongoing is going to be huge. Not every company has a D&I leader. If you don't, and I had many conversations with companies now that are figuring out how to, because again, it's something that they cannot ignore. But also, even if you don't, there's typically either resource groups or you have people within your company who really care about this, who are willing to help and lead with this. But again, having something regularly is a great way to keep this stuff in front of people. The third one, and to me, one of the most important of the five, they're all important, is addressing, systematic issues. And here's the thing, is that what's going to happen is we've got tons of companies who have made statements and have added Black Lives Matter to their website, their social, have made a statement about anti-racism and where they stand. And that is great. And it's a great first step. And, I don't speak for all Black people, but as a Black person, I know I've been blown away. I've gone to websites to go shop and, I can see that there's some effort. However, if we don't start addressing and making changes to things that have happened because of this racism, then it's all for naught. For Black people, lip service and PR opportunities are like, that's not what this is about. We really need to see, and for us to feel like a company really cares is when we start making changes. So a couple of those things would be looking at your salary and looking at the salary of your Black employees as compared to white employees in the same job. Is there equity there? And if not, fix it. Not to just look at it and do an exercise, but fix it. And whether or not it's there, I wouldn't assume that it's not without actually taking time to kind of analyze that type of information. Also looking at a number of different things. So looking at employee promotions and people that have been there for a certain amount of time, started in the same roles, where is one now versus the other? And are we able to look and see why that might be? Is it because they don't have the same networks? Because typically within work and everywhere else, your network is going to be similar to you. And so they may not have been in, right? Or down south, sometimes talk about the old boys club, and that may look really different at different companies. But taking a moment to really look at what that looks like at your company. And again, if you find discrepancies, figuring out a strategy and a plan to fix it. Some other things are around project allocation, on teams. Are the same people getting in front of executives? Are your Black employees having the same opportunity to present their work to executives or to work on stretch projects? We all know that typically stretch projects are what helps us kind of move to the next level. If not given the opportunity to do that, then many people kind of miss out on opportunities there. So again, just addressing these issues that have been deep rooted, and they are a result of oppression. They are a result of lack of equity and racism. And now we look and say, hey, this is what we look like, but how can we address this and actually fix it? The fourth one is about employee referrals. Look, I started in recruiting and worked many years in TA and leading TA, and always loved employee referral programs, and have done tons of work around optimizing employee referral programs. But when you look at employee referral programs, depending on the way your workforce looks, it's not always the best way to attract diverse candidates. If you have a mostly male, white workforce, then your referrals are going to also typically look that way, not always. So really looking at how much is your company depending on referrals. And if you are doing referrals, because I understand why companies do it, I really understand why we do referrals, right? You have someone that works there, understands the culture, recommending someone, they tend to be, kind of faster through the process, tend to stay longer because they already know someone. There's a lot of great reasons, but you really have to think about how that affects diversity. And it is a way of shutting people out also, who don't look like everyone else that works there, who may not know. So it's like, because of where I was born, schools I went to, I'm this circle, and therefore I don't have the golden ticket to get straight to the hiring manager. And so you've got to start evening the playing ground there. One way I've seen some companies do it, and in fact, at Delta, where I was leading kind of our diversity recruitment, we had an we're working on our employer for a program that was heavily worked on. We used our groups, right? So we use our employee resource groups. So your Hispanic employees, your Black employees, et cetera, and had employee referral programs specifically for that. So there are different ways that you can even out, but just be very conscious that if you're hiring most of the people at your company through employee referral program, and you don't already have a diverse workforce, then that typically is going to work against you. And then lastly, before we hop into our questions, the last one that I wanted to just mention is executive sponsorship opportunities. Executive sponsorship is a huge, huge, huge avenue for either people we consider high potential, which is a whole other tangent I can go on, but I won't. But executive sponsorship is certainly a way to help people to go into leadership roles, to learn more from people, and also to have, what is a sponsor? A sponsor is going to speak up for you. They're going to throw your name in the hat for things. When there's a big job that comes up, I can't tell you how many times in companies that I've worked with where I was partnering with senior level executives, and a role would come up and they're like, hey, what about so-and-so? Did you think about whatever? Did you ask? If Black people's names aren't coming up there because no one knows them, they haven't had an opportunity to be in front of these people, they aren't going to play golf with them, they're not going out to dinners and lunches with them, and so they're missing out on a ton of opportunities. And executives are missing out because they simply don't know them. And so if we're hiring that way, if we're giving promotions that way, it's definitely something that we need to look. How do we help many of these Black employees to also to get executive sponsorship also? And so those are kind of like 5 tactical things that if you're looking at a strategy on like how do we address these things and really make a difference, these are just things that I wanted to put out there for you to think about.
Thank you for detailing that out for us, Dionna. All right. So as we get started here, what are the best practices to navigate a conversation should someone choose to open up about their experiences that allows that person sharing to walk away feeling a sense of relief or support? What are appropriate responses that can be empathetic and supportive outside of I support you or I hear you?
Great question. So if a Black employee is decided to open up to you, their white colleague or their manager or a leader or just someone that they work with, and the question is like, what's the best way to listen to them or help them feel supported, et cetera. So the first thing is to listen. Like let them share how they're feeling and what their experiences are. Like listen. The other thing is, as business leaders and as HR leaders, we are wired to be very solution oriented and want to fix things. So it's very normal for us, if we hear about something or how someone feels, is that we want to, make recommendations of what they could do to like not feel that way. Or we think empathy means let me share something that's happened to me that's similar. And what we don't realize is in doing that we're taking away from that person's individual experience and we're making it about us. And this is a natural way to respond to a lot of things. Psychologically, it's the way many of us are there for our friends, and it's just not a great, most supportive way. So listening, I think it's going to be huge. Not trying to fix the problem. I've heard people say, and they've even said to me, like, I'm so sorry that like you're going through this or you're feeling that way. I think that's fine. Like, that's like, I don't know how to fix this. Like, I'm so sorry. I care about you as a person. I hate that you're feeling this. I'm sorry. But feeling like you have to apologize for the white race and history and all the things that happened in the past is not, I mean, that's not your way to carry. What what we need is for you to acknowledge because these things happen, there's certain things that just are not equitable. There's certain experiences that we are going to face, and there's certain like uphill battles and things that we have that you don't have. Not that we're looking for you to take all of the blame for your forefathers and, you know, et cetera. So I think listening, having empathy in the sense of like, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way and going through this, and not trying to, you know, fix the problem or thinking that, you know, that you Black people, you know, haven't thought of that already, whatever it is, however you think we can fix it, right? That you're kind of having to come in and save the day.
Thank you for calling that out, because I know that it can be the impulse to try and fix something or to, you know, utter a platitude is strong because it's an uncomfortable topic. But I think you're right. I think it's very important that we follow your advice on this. All right, so this next question was very important that we get to. How can Black employees cope with the fact that their colleagues and managers have implied or even explicitly stated that they are not allies and are not open to becoming one? Sub question under this was, how should a Black employee approach management if the company has not made an internal or external statement regarding recent events? Specifically, should the employee bring his or her concerns to management's attention? And if so, how? So let's tackle the first half first.
Sure. So I love that the word cope is in there, right? Because when you work with people, you know, that's one of those places, kind of like what they say, your family, you can't necessarily choose your family, and you can't, though some people do, you know, you can kind of take yourself out of situations, but so a Black employee has an outspoken maybe colleague or someone who's just implying that like, I'm not an ally. You know, this is to me similar to the person who wants to come in and debate with me about why all lives matter, right? So they're kind of going away from the Black Lives Matter and they want to, hey, don't leave me out, what about all of us, et cetera, right? And so I know for me, this is probably one of the hardest spaces for me to use empathy myself for how that person might be feeling, et cetera, because at this point, I oftentimes am like past, like I cannot care that you don't understand why Black Lives Matter. Like I can't spend my time, and I think as Black people, and obviously not just Black people, but I'm talking about Black people specifically here, but those who have been oppressed in general, typically over the years have built up this like sympathy for oppressors, right? Or for people that feel the opposite and don't always want the best for them. So they're more worried about not hurting their feelings, not being politically incorrect, not you know, making them feel bad for wanting to say all lives matter. Like, you know, they'll start with like, well, I know your life matters too, but that's not what we're talking about, right? So I think that there's a couple things you can do. One is please be conscious of your energy. We got a lot to do out here. We're dealing with a lot. Not only we're dealing with a lot, we're balancing things, whether it's at work, with your family, you're raising kids sometimes, or nieces or nephews or young people. There are policies that need to be made. There are protests to attend. Using all your time on someone who either does not care or literally like opposes who you are is not the best thing to do. Like mentally and emotionally, it's just not good for you. So, you know, I would recommend minimizing having those debates and conversations, especially right now, because it is a very emotional time. And I have white colleagues also who are arguing with family members and people that they know who they've been very disappointed with their views during this, and getting so upset. And again, it takes away from the energy that we need to like solve the problem. So that's one thing. And then the other part about it is, it's like, don't bow to make people comfortable. This isn't the time for it. Don't not, you know, say Black Lives Matter anymore because you have 3 or 4 people in your department or your group that feel like all lives matter. No, this is the time, like, this is a time to strongly stand behind. I know for me and a lot of Black people that I've talked to, it's a very odd time because we've been taught to assimilate so much in a sense that we go to work and we have to leave our Blackness at home. Let that sink in for a minute. We and what does that Blackness mean? It encompasses all of our experiences, and the racism we feel, the anger we feel about things, the music we listen to, the church life, all of these different cultural differences that we have to leave at home or leave in the car. I had someone made me laugh. They were saying how they drive to work and they're listening to like this heavy, like hardcore hip hop stuff coming in the parking lot, whatever. Then they turn it off and kind of walk in the building like with the smooth jazz and kind of, they begin to transition to the work selves. This is what Black people go through and what we've always gone through. It's become a norm for us. So for us to be able to be at work talking about Black Lives Matter, it's an odd feeling. It's the fact that you all care enough. We have 173 people on this call and majority of them are white. And whether it could be because it's a business reason you're here, for others, it's because they personally care about, but for the emphasis to be on what we can do to right wrongs to Black people, this is a twilight zone time for many of us. So just allowing and understanding that the space that we're in is full of gratitude and hope, but also, we're trying to figure out how this is going to work for us long term. And is this all real? And will there be real things that come out of it, as opposed to just a corporate statement? Lastly, and real quick, because I know I'm trying to watch time here, we talked about like, what if your company has not put a statement out? In fact, I talked to someone yesterday who their CEO was very adamant about not, still very all lives matter-ish in his response and not being comfortable with putting out a statement. So there's a couple things that I would recommend is if a statement hasn't come out yet, there are still companies that are completely tone deaf and really feel like if we don't mention it or bring it up, like we're just gonna pretend this isn't happening. It's like, say that the world burning down around you and you're just, still, hopping on your meetings and responding to emails. And so there are going to be some companies that just operate that way. And again, then part of that is on you. Part of it is, and not to say it's your responsibility, because God knows we have enough things you're responsible for. However, if it's important to you that your employee supports this, then I would say bring it up to HR. You may want to bring it up to your manager. Sometimes people feel HR is a safer place to start, and just ask the question, hey, I noticed a lot of companies have put out statements regarding Black Lives Matter. Have we put one out? And if so, I haven't seen it. Can you share it with me? That is going to make the person think about, well, shoot, if I haven't, then maybe it's something you need to think about. Secondly, also, if they're not, if your manager they don't know and they're like, we'll go to HR, and then HR is like, well, our senior leaders haven't. Try to set up a meeting with one of the senior leaders. Try to set up time with the CHRO as opposed to your business partner who you speak to regularly. Depending on the size of the company, go up even harder to your executives. All the way up to your CEO. If there was ever a time that they'd be willing to entertain this conversation with you, it's now. So take advantage of that. And again, I think that by raising your voice, it will definitely help them to kind of focus some attention. Now, for you, Mr. Employee, it also is another, we are looking at companies we're working for right now, and we're all kind of taking inventory. Duly noted that you did not or do not seem to care and did not do this. And this is something that I should know, because there's as our talent grows, as we think about where we're spending our time in the company, we want to help make money. You want to be with companies that understand and want to be behind this. So duly noted. But if you can work through the process and help that happen, it's a great experience and opportunity for you. But again, it's not necessarily your responsibility either. So it just depends on how involved you want to get.
Thank you for breaking that issue down, Dionna. And I do want to call out, we did have a couple of questions in the chat about like what is the white ally version of this, whatever. If you have
Yeah.
questions, a lot of these things were addressed, like I said, on last week's chat. But you are more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will feed you the same answers to questions that Dionna has been having with our team internally. I even caught, a chat that she had with a former coworker on a Facebook Live video a couple weeks ago, last week, and it was wonderful. And so I'm more than happy to send out links for those kinds of things to people.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Meg.
Anytime. All right, so this person had asked, what are the best ways for a primarily white team or organization to talk about and support the Black community and Black professionals right now? Going forward, if in this economic climate, hiring processes and other financial levers aren't readily available, what other options do they have?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And kind of another version of this, what if your organization is all white? What if your team is all white, right? So you're not doing it because you have a Black employee on your team that you feel like you want to make sure that they know you care. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it because you still understand the importance of starting this conversation with your white colleagues, because allyship is like essential and that you can have an influence with them. And so I think what we talked about in the beginning about having those check-ins and talking about race and a number of things, that those kind of 5 points in the beginning are all ways that I think that you can use to present this to your teams. I would urge you and encourage you, and if your team is majority all white, well, let's talk about all white teams, to not let this, don't miss this opportunity to still have these discussions. This is not a Black problem. This is not just a Black issue. This is an American issue. This is a global world issue. And so you don't know the people sitting around the table, how they may be personally affected. There are many who are also looking at you as an employer to see how you handle this, whether they're Black or not, if they really are truly an ally. Many people are looking for a safe place to talk about their fears, even as like a white person navigating this. And for you to be able to provide safe spaces to do that, I think are huge. So even if you don't have a big budget, if you have budget, I think this is a great time to do D&I training. So of course, unconscious bias is always a great place to start, but there's allyship training. There's a number of different training options there. So if you have budget, I think that that's a great place to start. It shows commitment, and you're not just telling people to go off and do something, you're actually providing the resource for them in-house. If you don't have the funding to do that, then I think starting with maybe your weekly team meeting, you're dedicating a certain amount of time to speak on some topic that's relevant to Black Lives Matter or what's going on right now. And it can be based on one question. What is systematic oppression? Could be another question like, what is an ally? The next week, you talk about what is an ally? And someone on the team look up, what it is and come back with some examples, and people have an opportunity to ask questions. Just start somewhere. Don't ignore it. Don't let it add to your list of 20 things that you have to do that you never get to. Make it a priority. And again, you can start as simple as 10 to 15, minutes during a meeting. And if you have budget, I think training is a great option too.
I do want to call out, we have a question further on in the deck that I honestly don't think we're going to get to just because of the time, but I do want to call this out because we had a couple people ask it in the chat, and I think it's a very important question. People are asking about if you are the leader of a team that is not diverse, but you have a potential to expand either with internal, pick your own internal employees or expand and hire outwards. What are you allowed, what are you supposed to ask HR for? Can you say, assemble diverse candidate profiles for me to review, or is that breaking some kind of hiring laws? Are you inevitably, mistakenly discriminating in trying to diversify your offerings? We also had a lot of questions about how can you get this program started if you're in a 10 to 12 person team and don't have the budget to hire someone for a D&I consultant. Yeah.
All right, so two things. One is if you have an opportunity to expand your team, that's a huge opportunity for you to start putting in work, real work, right? Like dedicating resources, et cetera, to add someone to your team, I think it would be great. So if you're doing it internally, then certainly talking to HR about if there is a diversity focus of internal mobility. So sometimes that's done through employee resource groups, and people will look at people who are leaders or involved in employee resource groups. Other companies have, specifically gender and ethnic minority high potential programs, or they've already identified people. So it really depends on what your company has. If you're hiring externally, if you have a recruiter or sourcer that works for you and helps bring you candidates, by all means, telling them that you want to ensure that the pool is diverse. That is what you're not guaranteed. I'm not going to just hire someone because they're Black. I'm not going to just hire someone because they're a woman, but I want to ensure that minorities, Black, Hispanic, women, et cetera, are part of the pool. If they're not a part of your pool, then of course you're not going to be able to ever hire anyone. So the first step is ensuring that you have a diverse pool. If you are the person who's responsible for your own sourcing, then that's also an opportunity for you, and really, really important that as you start looking at candidates, that you tap into a couple things. So what are some ways that you can do that? So for this conversation, we're talking specifically about Black people. And so if I'm in accounting, I want to go to the Black Accounting Association. If I'm looking for engineers, I'm going to go to Black Engineering. That's a great way to start. Also, my current engineers, if I have Black engineers on my team, I want to tap into them also. And we're growing the team and finding out if there's anyone that they would recommend, et cetera. Making an effort to ensure that more people know about your open opportunities there's nothing discriminatory about that. There's no reverse anything. It's not, you're making a concerted effort, because hiring diversity, doesn't happen by chance. Just posting a job, and what we like when I recruit, we call it post and pray. Just post, and you just hope that all of a sudden the pool that comes back is going to be 50% women, 50% Black, and all my percentages will be off right now, but that doesn't happen. So making a concerted effort. There are also organizations similar to PowerToFly where we're focused on women and women of color, but in general, there's a number of organizations that are focused on Black employees also. So making sure that you get your job in front of them. But it's a great opportunity. And I would love, Meg, just something for us to put on our radar is to have another conversation about the legalities. I've had a number of people reach out and say, is it illegal for me to want to, add more women and Black people on my team? Like, what is the legal way to do that? And so we're happy to maybe have another discussion about that as well. But don't be afraid to open up your pool and make sure that you have more ethnic minorities in your original pool.
Thank you for calling that out. And I think you're right. I made a note for us for later on that. I think that's a very, very good subject for us to dive into. All right, so this person wanted to know, how can I check in with my Black employees without making them feel like their emotions are on display or disrupting their privacy or putting them on the spot during this time?
That's an excellent question, Awesome. That is a great question, because I will tell you that several of my friends, colleagues, people that I've talked to who are Black have had some interesting stories about how people have attempted to, check on them, and they don't mean any harm, but that it has been just kind of jarring for one, and just a bit much. I don't know how else to say it. So to give you an example, if you're in a meeting and you have the one Black person on your team and just, zeroing in on them and calling them out, so how is this for you? I'm so sorry in front of the group. And so for a group of people who have been taught to assimilate and be a part of the team and to blend in as much as possible, et cetera, there's so much psychological things going on that we're already dealing with the trauma and the things that are going on there. But then now at work, to be called out specifically for being Black is not always a comfortable thing for many people either. So I think that if you are checking, on people, definitely doing it one-on-one as opposed to like in a group where you're like singling them out. Also, I think you give people an opportunity to kind of give you cues that is something that they want to talk about. Not everybody wants to talk about this. I mean, people are either having conversations at home, whatever. Not everyone wants to talk about it. And in particular, there are definitely Black people that don't want to have this conversation with white people right now. Like, I'm not sure how to navigate this conversation with people outside of my race right now. And now you're my boss, you're asking me, I can't tell you, like, I don't want to talk about it. Or maybe I can, or maybe I might not feel comfortable doing that. So I think definitely, looking for cues. If it's that person that comes in and they're like, oh my God, do you see what's going on? And you start having a conversation and it's organic, then absolutely. If it's not, you don't want them to feel like you're ignoring them. I know it's like a hard position to be in. But also, if you do talk to the person on your team and you call them in and you just, are sharing everything that's going on and you want to make sure how they're feeling, if there's anything that you can do, et cetera. Just, I think most importantly is coming with the right intent. And also doing it in a way where they don't feel like they have to take you up on it if they don't want to. And so those conversations will be different for different people. And also be prepared and be okay with them saying, like, I don't want to talk. Oh, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it. Like, okay. If someone tells you they're fine, please leave. End the conversation. Glad to hear it. If I can ever be here, if anything I can do to help, great. But not pushing. Well, I mean, how could you be fine? I know with everything that's going on, I know you might not really want to talk about it right now. I just want you to know. And then you're pushing it because, again, then this conversation has become about you and you doing what you feel like you need to do and not thinking about how that person is feeling. So just be very, very thoughtful about the person receiving these questions and your attempt at support as opposed to you making it about yourself.
Thank you for calling that out. I think that's a very important distinction to make there. Okay. How do we move forward as an organization during this time without seeming disingenuous in regards to making a PR statement? Now, correct me if you'd rather pass this one, because I think you addressed it a little bit at the intro, but is there anything you'd like to add to that?
During this time without seeming disingenuous. Yeah, I think that what we talked about at the beginning of the call, kind of those 5 points, is the way that you do it. Again, I think many Black employees are feeling like, okay, that's great. Like I saw one had a conversation and they were saying, okay, that's great. We see your statement, but let's see your executive team. What do they look like? Like, oh, well, and not that we expect that the executive team going to snap your fingers and it change all of a sudden. But the problem is that that's the way it looked already. And that's the way that it's been looking for forever probably. And so now you made your statement, but your entire board, your executive team all look a certain way. What's our plan to help change that? And that's where the work comes in for us as leaders. That's where the work comes in. It's for us to sit down and say, okay, what do we need to do? And that's when we talked about executive sponsorships and making sure people are getting stretch projects, adding something into reviews that have to do with promotion or preparing, Black employees for opportunities. If that's an area that you see is lacking in your company. I mean, really figuring out something. You all know in business, what we don't measure doesn't matter. So how are we going to measure the effectiveness of whatever strategy or programs we put together for this? And who's holding you accountable for it? And who are you holding accountable? So thinking about all of those things is how we're going to really move the needle and how it will become not just lip service, as they say, right? Or we're walking the walk and not just talking.
Yeah, and I think, we're even facing this internally, honestly. Like, we're a diversity company and we can do better, which means everyone can do better, which means no one is immune from this, looking at this as a, look at yourself internally, look at your org, look what's going on, make sure that wherever you can be doing better, you are, put the plans in place, and then do the work and keep doing the work. All right. So we got this question a lot about tools and resources. I'm not going to dive into this because we have a couple of resources options. If you have other questions, head to the blog. We have a whole list of resources that we have posted, and we will keep updating. It's going to be an evergreen thing.
And I have a blog that went up yesterday, and there's a link in there for resources. And so it's on PowerToFly's website. Again, I think it was yesterday, and it was a blog kind of on this subject matter. But there's a number of different resources.
And I do want to call out the fact that Dionna does provide training, and she does both internal bias training. She does assessment of people's recruiting, their recruiting practices. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over this, Dionna. You're probably much better able to pitch it than I am.
No,
but yeah, this is something that we offer as a service, like for B2B customers. So please, if you have questions about it, please email us. There's hi@PowerToFly. You can also connect with myself on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to send you to the right places. It's definitely something that we offer. We sort of touched on this about what you can do if you're not able to financially support a DE&I consultant or program. Is there anything you'd like to add to this? I feel like we're rushing, and I do apologize.
Yeah, I think, so if you have, one of the things that I just mentioned is like taking those small things, like having these conversations in your leadership meetings, teaching your managers and leaders how to be able to, have conversations with their employees, teaching them some techniques or strategies that they can use on their team. So again, whether it's that 15 minutes before they kick off their team meeting, they have some discussion, talking to them about the things that we're talking about today. It's great that you're here. If you're a frontline manager, then that is huge. And I'm so glad you're here because you were the one actually touching employees. If you, have a number of frontline managers that report to you, or you're in HR where you're kind of responsible for ensuring that they have having these conversations with them, I think is going to be huge. So if you don't have a diversity and inclusion person, and you have an HR person who's kind of running these things, I think attending things like this, we have a diversity summit next week that's free and has a number of amazing speakers, and just finding out about different things that you can learn as much as possible. There's some people that I've talked to who are not diversity and inclusion folks at all, and they've kind of been thrown into that role now all of a sudden because of the things that are going on. And it's like, where do I find information? So I think, obviously, Google can be our best friend or worst enemy, but attending events and just learning as much as you can. It's not as much the work we need to do right now, other than I think training if you can afford it. The financial part of it, making sure your ERG, Black ERG, is supported and that their voices are being heard. There are a number of things that don't cost anything that we can be doing right now.
Absolutely. And one of the things I do want to call out for anybody that is not aware that it's going on, our diversity summit is next week. It had a focus initially of remote work in an age of post-COVID-19, and to reflect the outcry from our communities, and obviously the need for people to have resources and instruction and open up and have conversations about these things. There will be plenty of conversations and thought leaders having speeches about diversity and inclusion practices and how that impacts business, both in small ways and in large ways, and how we need to, as we rebuild and come back from the pandemic and all the stuff that's happened in 2020. It's very important to be having these conversations and not forget how important diversity is when it comes to your business. All right, we have 3 minutes left. Do you want to try and address one last question?
Sure.
Okay, so this person wanted to know, what would effective allyship look like that doesn't put emotional labor on Black people, but also doesn't gentrify the space? Also curious how we can ensure that guilt doesn't pull us into inaction.
What would effective allyship look like that does not put emotional labor on Black people? Okay. All right, so that's a good question, actually. So becoming an ally, in a space where most people don't understand what being an ally is. What is happening a lot is that you're going to your Black employees and either asking them, you know, how you can be involved or how you can add support or like, what should you do? And there are some people like me, this is like my work, and I love, this is my way of helping my community, of my way of like wanting to improve things. And so I am very open to those conversations. Not everyone is. Not everyone, is definitely not the responsibility of Black people to do the work, to bring back more resources, to show you, et cetera. Then it's kind of, not to mention, it is an emotional subject for many people. So again, I think that it's up to you to figure out how to be an ally. It's up to you to offer to do things. It's up to you to just do the work on the front end and just not be dependent on the Black people around you that you're hoping to help to provide you with all the answers and the direction to do it. That being said, I also think that it is so important. I had a conversation earlier, was a huge discussion on LinkedIn and I think on Twitter too, about someone recently that was doing a webinar similar to this, but they were talking about how to support Black employees, and all the panelists were white women. And there's this group of HR folks that were like, what the heck? Like, why are we not involved in this conversation? And why there's no Black representation here on like what we need? And so you've got to kind of weigh it and kind of balance it and ensure that Black people are part of the conversation. Don't try to figure this out yourself, because there are many things that we do look at differently based on our different experiences. And so I think it's going to just be essential that you have open conversation with those that are open to doing it, but not to burden those who don't want to or who are not emotionally up right now to do it.
Thank you for calling that out, Dionna. And so I know we are out of time for today. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who joined us today. Everyone that submitted very interesting, amazing, thought-provoking, really good questions. It shows that you guys are really here to learn and interested in making lasting change in your organizations, and that is huge. And let's hope that it's a wave that continues. Last but not least, Dionna, thank you for taking the time to give us both your professional expertise as well as connect with us about this issue. I know that it is, like you said, it's the way that you fight on the front lines, and we appreciate it hugely, because just because it's something that you enjoy doing doesn't mean it's something you have to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone that attended. And thank you in advance for the work that you're about to put in. I know it's not always comfortable. I know this is not an easy subject to tackle, but it's one that must be tackled. And folks like you are going to be the ones to help change policy, help change the way employers are looking at racism in their organizations. And so thank you for the work you're doing. And if there's anything that we at PowerToFly can do to help as you're going through this transition, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.